From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. Welcome back to the program. We're live on radio, video stream, and podcast worldwide, and we're doing it from our flagship, which is in Central Florida, Tampa Bay, Sarasota, Clearwater, St. Pete, our flagship radio market. Let's look at the news. Let's see what's going on in this strange time that we're in, where we're starting to realize that human beings are not quite as rational as we thought they were, that they are actually very herd and hysterical when afraid, when wanting to feel self-righteous, that those situations create unprecedented amounts of psychosis, hysteria, madness, nonsense, and idiotic choices that are not in the best interest of the people making them. People lose their minds en masse when they're afraid. And then they want to, attack people who don't share their same hysteria, because it is a kind of an affront to their whole frame of mind, right? If you feel hysterical and somebody else just laughs at you or yawns at your hysteria, what does that do? It makes them go worse, get crazier. And it's a shame because, the left used to be filled with some critical thinking. They used to be very suspicious of corporate power and censorship. Now they fully embrace it. The left was the one that made all the movies and all the news articles bashing the criminal malfeasance of Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and these other giant pharmaceutical companies now that they now say 100% fact, nothing could possibly go wrong with their rushed products that Donald Trump oversaw. It's very stupid. Their narratives have nothing to them but pure, desperate power. That's all they have. The power of having so many of the institutions, the pharmaceutical companies, the big banks, the big food companies, all share the same hymnal, all share the same song, you see? And that's where we have all of this constant attack against any dissent. Every day we see this. We see a constant attack against anybody who is a free thinker. Anybody who says, hey, I'm a scientist. I'm not going to go along with this groupthink. That's not how science is done. That person becomes viciously attacked in the public media and completely socially shunned by herd bigots. And that's nowhere. That's not how you do science. That's not how you do culture. But that is how you do power play. That is how you do trying to grab more and more power. That's a great way, because human beings don't like to be alone. They don't like to feel isolated. And if you can threaten people with those feelings all the time, if you don't go along with what someone wants, that's a very powerful motivator. It's a very powerful motivator to get people to do what you want, is to make them feel like they're going to be completely isolated and alone. Humans do not like that feeling. Humans want to feel like they're doing what everybody else is doing. We're mimetically wired to want to fit in. And we think that the best way to stand out is to fit in better than the others, everybody else, right? It's kind of a funny paradox, but that's the heart of so much of what motivates human beings is, I will stand out by fitting in better than anybody else. And that exists on left and right and everything. And that's what dominates the atmosphere of the media. And comedian Rob Schneider posted an image of a priest with a face mask and a family with a baby being held up, and the priest is far, far away, shooting what appears to be a water gun, I guess, to do a baptism, with the baby held up and the squirt gun shooting water at the baby. And he said, oh my dear Lord, what will history say about us? That's a great thing to ask, what will history say about us? What will history say about such madness in this time? Bloomberg reports, world's most vaccinated nation activates curbs as cases rise. So I thought that was supposed to stop cases from rising, but yet a country that's the most vaccinated nation activates curbs and shutdowns as cases rise. Another thing we see, Los Angeles Times says it's the best time ever to sell a used car as long as you don't need to buy one. And of course, that's because of all this artificial money printing out of thin air that's been sent to people as little UBI experiments, which is going into people wanting to buy another car, right? Wanting to buy a used car. And when that happens, you're going to have an inflation in the prices. Other things are going up too, including costs of building a home. Housing going up, car market's going to be overheated. Inflation is a very serious thing that, people who get educated by garbage McWoke government education, they don't know anything about inflation. They don't know anything about any of this stuff. They're just constantly induced into religious catechesis to be a part of a herd, an all-encompassing herd that says money can be printed out of thin air, and if it causes the used car market to artificially inflate in price as people start throwing that newly printed money at things like a second car or whatever, doesn't matter. It has no effect. God is government. Government is God. That's what folks have been taught to believe. And the government, the other gods in the pantheon of government are the corporations that spend so much money controlling the levers of government. How can you be considered a progressive and be so stupidly, idiotically, naively trusting 100% of anything that the giant pharmaceutical companies that your liberal progressive ideology has spent decades and decades making movies after movies, news stories after news stories, television shows, investigative reports, everything bashing giant companies. But yet you don't see the irony in these same progressive liberals now saying if you don't take an experimental rushed big pharmaceutical product that Donald Trump pushed through, then you're a problem. You're a threat. This is an insanity. This is pure insanity. No self-awareness, no intelligence behind these feelings, but just pure insanity, pure amnesia. They can't even remember that their own ideology has been extremely skeptical, rightfully so, of the corporate criminal malfeasance of the same companies they now laud are the number one, 100% perfect, never going to have a serious side effect ever. Take it to the bank. And that's why they're promoting Pfizer and these other companies, pushing these new products, these new vaccines into even 6-month-old children. Even though the babies don't have bad experiences with the virus that the vaccine is supposed to prevent. How did this happen? How did the left become so ignorant of science and so ignorant of human nature? And it goes for the right too. They're the uniparty. Much of it's the same. How did they become so stupidly, idiotically, sycophantically trusting of the same corporations they spent generations telling us, be careful about giant multinational corporations. Be careful about their ignorance that they pass off as 100% fact. So much of Big Pharma is totally erroneous. We now know that statin drugs are not the thing that you need to be pushing onto people. We now know that red meat has been vilified for no reason. There is no link to it in heart disease, as the government, information has misled us to believe for decades. We now know that so many of the things, mammograms, are not what we thought. They were not the things that we were told that you have to have as an essential thing for women's health. So many things, time and time again, turn out to be not exactly what they were sold to us as. We now know that you can work with diabetes by correcting diet, by removing seed oils and sugar and processed flour. And that can sometimes provide way better holistic healing of the body than side effect masking big pharmaceutical products. So why in the world, as we continue to become more educated, do some people seem to be going the exact opposite direction? Will they ever recover their sanity? Will it be when, 30 years from now? Or will they still be that stupidly, idiotically unself-aware as to go along with monopoly, unaccountable government bureaucracies who are obviously in bed with giant pharmaceutical companies who have decades of corporate malfeasance and shenanigans documented by the very same media outlets that now tell them, do not ever question any of the products that we tell you that they make that you need to take. And you say, what in the hell? What's wrong with people? How stupid could an adult be? I genuinely want to know how dumb people could be so en masse. That you're supposed to forget the decades of bad drugs and corporate payouts and criminal things and revolving door relationships that these pharmaceutical companies have had with the regulators. And that these companies now provide a rushed product by Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump was the guy behind it. We were told everything he touched was awful. This is a man who they said he couldn't trust he had no trustworthy personnel, that he was rushing the vaccine, that his rushing of the vaccines would be obvious, that would be something to be skeptical of. They were telling us that. Kamala Harris was saying it. She's now the vice president of the United States. She said, I'm skeptical of these drugs in the debate. She said to Mike Pence, I'm skeptical of the drugs made that are being pushed by Donald Trump. But we're supposed to be dumb enough to forget that? No, we're not dumb enough. At least I hope not. I hope people are somewhat sentient and self-aware at this point where they can see that this is ridiculous, what the media is doing and what Facebook and all these giant corporations who tell us every day, like the idiotic ABC News report for those who are just tuning in on radio, said before the broadcast, where they said these were false claims of any kind of fraud in the election. They don't know that. That's not journalism. You could say, if a journalist wants to say, you could say unproven that these evidence, because there was fraud, there were dubious election behaviors. That's a fact. Dead people did vote. That's a fact. All kinds of last minute rule changes that were unconstitutional according to state constitutions and so forth. That's a fact that happened. So they can say, if they wanted to actually be a journalist, they could say these have been unproven to have changed the outcome of the election. But to say false claims that Donald Trump makes, that's not even journalism. That's a pathetic press release for an unelected bunch of folks that are really excited about consolidating power and using your liberties to gobble them up and then produce a kind of great reset in which people are not allowed to have the same level of freedom they had before, because when you allow people to have too much freedom, a lot of crony capitalists who couldn't make it in the real world, they're not able to make the obscene profit margins that they currently make by curtailing so much of our liberty at our expense. This is the reality that we're in today, and it's something that we need to be very mindful of. Let's take a break and return in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
David Granosky here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania Catania personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. Let's go back to our series, The Great Remembering, where we look at, mainstream corporate press, very state-submitted media outlets, just to look at their own record of reporting on the companies like Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and Moderna that we're supposed to now believe could not possibly have made a mistake being rushed by the Orange Man himself with experimental, never done before gene therapy, mRNA vaccines. Here's a story now. The Johnson & Johnson one, I believe, is a traditional vaccine, but here's a story in People magazine. Again, people.com is an extremely McWoke, corporate, vanilla, state media, outlet. But they're, of course, telling us, get everybody, all the kids, young kids, vaccinated with this rush product from Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and Moderna. Well, here's a story they just wrote about in 2019. Jury awards woman with terminal cancer $12 million in lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson and Colgate. California jury decided Wednesday that Johnson & Johnson and Colgate talcum products likely caused a woman's terminal cancer and awarded her $12 million in damages. The Alameda County Superior Court jury determined that it was likely that the three products, Johnson & Johnson's baby powder and shower-to-shower products and Colgate's Cashmere Bouquet, contained asbestos that caused Patricia Schmidt's mesothelioma. They determined that the companies knew about the asbestos and failed to warn consumers and found them guilty of negligence, though the jury could not agree if they acted with malice, oppression, or fraud, which would entitle Schmidt's to punitive damages. Law360.com or Law360 reported, this is the fourth lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson that went in favor of the plaintiff, though 5 other cases in the last several months found that the company was not responsible for the plaintiff's cancer. There are over 13,000 similar cases awaiting court dates. In December, Reuters published an in-depth investigation, this is from 2019 on people.com, that found Johnson & Johnson knew its baby powder occasionally tested positive for small amounts of asbestos and allegedly covered up the findings. Their examination of internal company and court documents determined that Johnson & Johnson had known this since 1971, but never shared that information outside of the company. Now, that's People magazine. Now, why are we supposed to be told by the same stupid people.com now that kids have to take a rushed product from Johnson & Johnson or else they're not allowed to be human? What the hell is this stuff? I mean, why do we have to take this stuff as if this should be considered serious, valid ways of talking about things? This is completely insane. That they've been found in courts to be covering up information about cancer-causing asbestos in baby powder, but oh my goodness, no, they totally couldn't at all ever have anything that you need to be worried about now with this latest product. Come on. I mean, why are we supposed to be that dumb? This is ridiculous. Only the most low info person owned by groupthink and bigotry and just primitive superstition about the state having some kind of omnipotent power and corporations or something. I mean, what in the heck else could explain this, right? What else could explain this madness that we see all around us? That doesn't, just because, of course, obviously, for those who watch CNN, we have to explain to people that just because we're pointing out that they've been found liable for negligence for knowingly having cancer-causing products in their baby powder, that doesn't mean, therefore, of course, for sure, the drug that their television is now telling us we must take or else not be considered part of polite society, that doesn't mean that that's therefore bad. It just means that why are we not allowed to remember these same media outlets and the decades and decades and decades of them doing investigative reports like Reuters showing bad actions, negligence at best, and sometimes criminal behavior from these same companies that we're now supposed to be subservient to the whole world over. Come on, it's so stupid. Back in a moment.
Find the best coverage of Florida sports all in one place.
SportsTalkFlorida.com covers all the Florida teams you know and love with in-depth interviews, original coverage, and insight on the team that makes the news in Florida.
Whether it's the Bucks, Lightning, Rays, Jags, Dolphins, Marlins,
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered.
or any of our college teams like the Knowles, Gators, Bulls, Canes, or Knights, you can find it all at SportsTalkFlorida.com.
Sports Talk Florida has got you covered. SportsTalkFlorida.com.
President Biden continues to promote his American Rescue Plan today, highlighting the Restaurant Revitalization Fund that launched this week. It provides more than $28 billion in direct relief to smaller restaurants left struggling in the wake of COVID-19. Portions of the fund have been set aside for minority and veteran-owned businesses that made less than $500,000 in pre-pandemic revenue. Many that the president says missed out on earlier aid.
And to make sure the relief is distributed fairly, we also set aside funds for the smallest restaurants, bars, food trucks, and many family-owned restaurants that haven't gotten any help to date.
The Justice Department has filed an appeal to a federal judge's ruling today to vacate the CDC's nationwide eviction moratorium for renters. The judge ruled the CDC exceeded its authority. In Rome this hour, an Italian court is set to read the verdict for the 2 American students standing trial for the killing of a police officer in Rome in 2019. I'm Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Neighbor's Choice returns. Let's go back to some more of the great remembering, where we look at these same media outlets that tell us now we all must have our kids, our pregnant women, our child, rearing age women, childbearing women, all these kids, all these young people, 6 months even now, they want them to have this product that was rushed by Orange Man Bad, Donald Trump. And yet, these same media outlets have had decades and decades of them reporting on negligence, knowingly misinforming the public, putting drugs out that cause a lot of harm, and then not letting people know about it until way later. CNN.com has a story from June 8, 2006 as part of our great remembering. Pfizer sued over alleged Lipitor side effects. 2 plaintiffs say cholesterol-cutting blockbuster caused nerve and muscle damage and memory loss. Pfizer says the drug is safe. Lipitor, the world's top-selling drug from the world's leading pharmaceutical company, has been targeted by 2 lawsuits blaming it for memory loss and damage to the nervous system. The plaintiffs also have accused Pfizer, maker of the cholesterol-cutting drug, of having failed to inform consumers in the medical profession of serious side effects associated with the statin Lipitor, according to a statement from plaintiff lawyer Mark Crum. Plaintiffs Charles Wilson, 60, a former insurance executive from Atlanta, and Michael Mazzariello, 47, an attorney from New York, filed the lawsuits Wednesday night in the New York State Supreme Court. This is from 2006 in CNN. Wilson took Lipitor for 17 months from 2002 to 2003 and blames the drug for memory loss, nervous system damage, and weakness in his arms and legs, which caused him to leave his job. Mazzariello blames Lipitor for memory loss and muscle damage, and he needs a cane to walk. There's another story in CNN from 2010, 38,000 more bottles of Lipitor recalled over odor complaints. Pfizer is recalling an additional 38,000 bottles of the cholesterol-fighting drug Lipitor after reports of an odor linked to the packaging bottles, the drug company said in a statement. We have thoroughly evaluated the root cause, which is episodic exposure of the bottle to low levels of TBA, and they are shipped or stored. The company said the rate of odor complaints was fewer than 3 per million bottles. So that's really a non-story, at least from what I saw there. But the point is that there's countless stories from CNN and NBC, CBS, and ABC, New York Times, Washington Post, People Magazine, all reporting on a long history of these companies not doing the best by the public, sometimes to great harm. And I want to know what you guys think about this other story that's been going on. Reports that they're going to be disclosing what the government wants the public to know about what they know about so-called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, formerly known as UFOs. You've seen that state-submitted media outlets like the New York Times and many others have been talking about the Pentagon being way more open to acknowledging the reality of so-called UAPs. What do you make of this 180-day report that was passed in the COVID bill that Trump signed? Should be out by June next month. And there's a lot of debate as to what the point of it is. Why now? How much can we trust? I mean, the government has lied us into so many wars. They've lied us into trusting in garbage pseudoscience for food pyramid advice. They've lied about the need to bail out giant corporations. And they've lied again about so many excuses that they've used to create regime change chaos around the world, that people have a right to be skeptical and should be very skeptical about any time they want to do something new. Like, oh, we're going to disclose what we know about unidentified aerial phenomena. What do you think of that? What do you make of this story that's coming up? Is this something that's going to be world changing? Or is this going to be a lot of muddied, dubious information? Newsmax reports that ex-Senator Harry Reid believes Lockheed Martin had UFO fragments. This was published this week. Lockheed Martin, a leading U.S. aerial defense contractor, might have had fragments from a crashed, unidentified flying object. The Pentagon did not permit former Senator Majority Leader Harry Reid to see. I was told for decades that Lockheed had some of these retrieved materials. Reid, 81, who once took credit for securing $22 million annually for the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, told the New Yorker. And I tried to get, as I recall, a classified approval by the Pentagon to have me go look at the stuff. They would not approve that. I don't know what all the numbers were, what kind of classification it was, but they would not give that to me. Lockheed Martin declined the New Yorker's request for comment. It'll be interesting to see what this story, what happens with this story, and whether people will respond to it or yawn. There's so much, again, years and years of the government misleading people that they're just numbed out by it. And there's so much hysteria in the media that ends up being nothing. I was listening to Tom Woods on a recent podcast he put out, where he was talking about how at the beginning of this pandemic last year, the media would almost gleefully report on Japan as about to get wiped out and totally destroyed and vanquished because they weren't doing the same type of lockdowns that the groupthink lemmings in the West wanted them to do. And it didn't happen. And the same thing happened when Georgia said they were going to open up. They said, oh my goodness, it'll be a bloodbath. But bloodbath didn't happen. Georgia turned out to have moderate, medium level case situation. Same thing happens with Florida to this day. The dumb lemmings come out in unison every time he does something that threatens them, and they call him Death Santis or whatever, these stupid things they come up with, because he dared to not clamp down on freedom the way they wanted everybody to do. And you see this over and over again, that people become invested into hysterical groupthink. But this is the sausage making of history. All of history has been written by crowds that scapegoat people and scapegoat and vilify things and go for power grabs and create oppressive structures and then write the guilt and write the narratives to justify what they did. That's that. Most of history is all about that. Most of ancient society is all about that. We're just seeing it happen in real time, and it's shocking to people because most people have a very naive kind of happy-go-lucky view of human nature, that human nature is not prone to evil, that human nature is innately good. That's what government schools teach people a lot of times, that human nature is innately good, but that, McWokeism says that, if you have social constructs like whiteness or maleness or whatever, that those things are what pollutes the innately good human nature. This stuff is baked into so much of what we have today. This assumption that humans can be given ultimate power and monopolies of education and monopolies of medicine and monopolies of media, and they won't use it for ignorant, idiotic, and wicked purposes. That is a religious faith and a false creed of human nature. Speaking of false creeds, I saw this photo posted by Natalie Denalishan. It says, last night on the Bank of England, and it's a image of print von Mises, not money, with a Bitcoin symbol below it. There's an image, I guess, that was projected onto the Bank of England in London. And that's an example, von Mises is the renowned economist for free market understanding, of which, the Mises Institute is named after him. And that's a great point, is that folks need to be studying real economics right now, not money. Von Mises warned of central banks. He warned that, the Austrian school in its entirety warns of central banks and what they do to destroy the economy. They don't just destroy the economy, they destroy the moral fabric of a culture, because people become obsessed with consumption, and they begin to have a high time preference for consuming things rather than saving and deferring gratification. And they become obsessed with themselves in the moment rather than thinking about what will help their great-grandchildren prosper. All these things are a result of having central banks and having governments print money out of thin air to appease the populace. And that's an example of why I think conservatives should not be fighting for their schools, government schools. They should be fighting to get out of them and to get their money back so that they can teach their kids in a private or homeschool or co-op or micro school the truth of economics, like what von Mises represents and teaches, and the truth of nutrition. Your kids could have so much of a better start if they could get out of government schooling, where they will be fed garbage, vegetable oils, carbs, and sugars, rather than learning the truth about nutrition and proper care of the human body and the human mind with the proper fuel. Your kids would do way better getting out of government school and learning about von Mises and the Austrian school to understand how economics really works, how supply and demand works, why central banks are a disaster, an inevitable disaster. Kids would do much better getting out of government school completely so they could learn the truth of history, the truth of anthropology. And who knows, maybe they could even learn that physics, as the television presents it, is a house of mirrors with a lot of ignorance and assumptions, and the same religiosity that informs other fields of so-called settled science are fully that same religiosity infects a field as hallowed as physics as well. There are so many things that we can learn as a people, so many things that we can learn as a society, but it will require us doing the things necessary to unplug from the institutions that are producing generations of failed ideas and failed outcomes and failed addiction to the state. Schools that are based on monopoly government funding are a disaster. You should not send kids to learn about garbage, McWoke, Foucault nonsense, weaponizing people to hate each other just for the powerful to divide and conquer. That's not what kids should be forced to hear. Now, I'm not on the same bandwagon as some folks who say, oh, let's ban these things. No, I think kids should, at a certain age, engage with critical theory. But they should be able to have a foundation of a proper, robust, intelligent education prior to being engaged with this critical theory so that they can have the proper ability to critically think and see the ignorance that's presented as the only game in town for justice or dealing with oppression. So, yeah, I mean, that's something that, again, I'm going to continue to emphasize for those who are sick and tired of the nonsense, is that you've got to do the hard work to unplug from these institutions now. Unplug your family from these institutions. Let go of the garbage food pyramid guidelines, the toxic seed oils that they encourage, and really educate yourself as to the long history of Big Pharma failing to provide reliable solutions to our health as well. So many things that we have the opportunity right now to say, you know what, I've had enough of this ignorance, and I'm going to use this time of mass hysteria to unplug from these failing institutions and build something that's way better and more robust for the future. I'm David Gronowski. We'll take a break and return on A Neighbor's Choice.
Quality. Ask for White Oak Pastures beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. David Granosky here, your host. Let's look at some of the YouTube comments that we have on our video stream going on. Benjamin, YouTube commenter on our stream, says the peer pressure being put on Americans to take a vaccine that we have no clue about the long-term effects of is greater than those felt during high school to do drugs. And this is being done by grown adults, if we can call them that. That's well said. Just do it. That's the camp, just do it. Just do it. You have to do it. That's what the media and all these companies coordinating together. Never seen anything this blatantly ridiculous in our modern history of coordinated ignorance. None of the Magic Marker, a YouTube commenter, says none of the vaccines have FDA approval, only emergency approval. Even if you trust the FDA, they haven't even signed off. Peter Quinones said that he is waiting for the human trials to be complete before he takes the vaccine. Aaron, commenting, says, my high school and college economics classes were a joke. Everything I know about economics was thanks to the Mises Institute. And for those who are familiar with the show, tomorrow we'll have Jeff Deist on the program, the president of the Mises Institute, who's a frequent guest of this show. Another comment says, I'm convinced the baby boomer generation will go down as one of the worst, most selfish generations in American history. And that may be something worth discussing, but in this other side of it, I see it as just another attempt by those who are purveyors of the status quo to divide people by categories. Generation being another groupthink category that we're supposed to be siloed into. NBC reports, again, white, here, look at the stupidity of the headlines you see with these people. White COVID vaccine rejectors. How many focus groups did they use to get that sentence right? White coat, they got like, okay, how do we make them look as bad as possible? Let's call them rejectors. That's the new term that we've done focus group studies, and it sounds like very psychologically convincing. Rejectors. So we call them white because now whiteness is the thing that is the scapegoat class that they want to vilify. So you don't want to be anywhere near the word white. So it's stupid. It's idiotic stuff. White COVID vaccine rejectors threatened. Threatened. That's scary. You don't want to be threatened. Herd. Yeah, let's just leave it there. Threaten the herd, right? No, but they put herd immunity. Can we change their minds in time? Now, their ignorant pseudoscience definition of herd immunity is only including those who've been vaccinated. It doesn't include millions of people who have already had the virus and developed natural immunity. It doesn't include folks who have had crossover immunity, right? They don't count that. They want to ignorantly, stupidly rewrite science for their own idiotic, failed political ideology that NBC serves as a handmaiden to represent. As physicians who practice on opposite ends of the United States and in vastly different communities, we're watching the national race to vaccinate our fellow Americans with both optimism and alarm. This is by Dr. Rob Davidson and Dr. Bernard Ashby. Here's where the alarm sets in. Even as we accelerate vaccinations, an immovable force, that sounds terrifying, sounds like a war, stands in the way of achieving community immunity. Millions of Americans who are simply saying, no way. As of mid-April, both Florida and Michigan were hotspots for the more severe B.1.1.7 COVID-19 variant that originated in the UK and that is now the dominant strain nationwide. This variant is also sending younger, previously healthy people into our hospitals. With the coronavirus mutating to become more contagious and possibly more lethal, vaccination is more important than ever. Yet vaccine refusal, not reluctance, not maybe later, but flat out rejection could prevent us from reaching the threshold even when epidemiologists say we can safely and responsibly fully reopen all aspects of society. In rural, overwhelmingly white places like rural Western Michigan, these are the folks who stagger into the emergency room, sick and struggling to breathe, yet still tell nurses and doctors that neither COVID-19 masks and vaccines are real. You see how stupid and idiotic this propaganda is? That if you don't want to take this rushed product that Donald Trump rushed through, these guys are telling you that you are the kind of people who are rural. You stagger into emergency rooms, sick and can't breathe, having had probably decades of government subsidized single-payer nutrition science, seed oil sludged into your mouth for decades in your body, bioaccumulating linoleic acid, leukotoxin. But this is what they want to. This is what they want to dehumanize you. Yet still telling nurses and doctors that neither COVID-19 masks and vaccines are real. So if you are not for taking the vaccine, NBC is trying to say this is idiotic. Then the article goes on to say that in September 2020, polls showed that half of all black people and 4 in 10 Hispanic people wouldn't get a vaccine more than other groups. Hospitals, doctors, public health, and community groups began reaching out to and engaging with black and Hispanic communities about vaccines. Black physicians partnered with black celebrities and faith leaders. Spanish language PSAs hit the airwaves in Miami. Black physicians and nurses staffed vaccination clinics at places like Brentwood Pool in Michigan. Spanish-speaking health professionals set up clinics in the heart of Hispanic communities. Slowly, matriarchs from black neighborhoods and pastors in Spanish-speaking churches began getting vaccinated and telling people about it. Barbershops and grocery stores announced vaccine clinic locations. The more information black and brown doctors shared, the more black and brown people trusted them and began to accept the value of getting vaccinated. In the middle of a pandemic that was killing and hospitalizing disproportionately higher rates of them, black and brown people began to publicly talk about vaccines as a shield that would help keep them safer, stay on the job, and protect their families. And they began telling others to get vaccinated. Notice these idiotic people in this that are writing this article don't say anything about how they should stop eating vegetable oils, people who are worried about getting the virus. None of them say that. You see that? None of them say stop eating the toxic, carcinogenic vegetable oils that are linked to the obesity rates that cause this virus to be sometimes severe for folks. You don't hear them say that, do you? But they're just there to help the people. Oh, wow, they're just perfectly 100% infallibly perfect in their pronouncements. And so the story goes on to say we've got to double down in pressure campaigns to target rural people, or else they're going to destroy it all for everybody. In coming months, the race to vaccinate America will likely feel more like a slog where every shot counts and every 4-H conversation matters. One conversation at a time, every physician has an opportunity to change a mind and get us back to normal. Back to normal? I mean, Dr. Fauci said he still doesn't want to go to a restaurant or places like that, even though he got the vaccine. So how is that going to get us back to normal? See, their propaganda doesn't even have any consistency to it. It's just idiotic, contradictory nonsense. If one country doctor can persuade a member of the Michigan militia to change his mind and get vaccinated, maybe there is hope after all, says NBC. It's insane. Totally wild and crazy. We'll take a quick break and return in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
Not given due process. Attorney L. Chris Stewart represents the Brooks family.
We find it mind-boggling that our elected officials and the former chief weren't aware of the proper procedure to fire an officer. So now it is questions of, was that done to temporarily pacify the protesters and the people around the world that were upset?
Officer Rolfe's attorney says he remains on administrative leave. The Yankees and the Mets can increase capacity from 20% to 100% for home games starting May 19th, as long as fans are vaccinated against COVID-19. This is ABC News.
Hey renters, it's Ty Pennington for Guaranteed Rate. Stop paying your landlord's mortgage every month. Look, mortgage rates are still historically low, so go to rate.com now to get a mortgage on your first home and upgrade your life. Like a legit home office, a new deck for summer, maybe a pool, you name it. Guaranteed Rate can help you go from renting to buying like crazy fast. Start at rate.com today. That's rate.com.
Equal housing lender, subject to credit approval. Company NMLS ID 2611, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef.
when afraid, when wanting to feel self-righteous, that those situations create unprecedented amounts of psychosis, hysteria, madness, nonsense, and idiotic choices that are not in the best interest of the people. Making self-righteous, people lose their minds in mass. Situations create, they're afraid, unprecedented amounts, and then they want to, attack people who don't share their same hysteria, madness, nonsense, because of idiotic choices that are not in the best interest of the people. Making self-righteous, people lose their minds in mass. Unprecedented amounts, and then they want to, attack people who don't share their same hysteria, madness, nonsense, because of idiotic. It is a kind of an affront to their whole. Making self-righteous, people lose their minds in mass. Unprecedented amounts, and then they want to. Shame, because the left used to be filled with some critical thinking. They used to be very suspicious of corporate power and censorship. Now they fully embrace it. The left was the one that made all the movies and all the news articles bashing the criminal malfeasance of Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and these other giant pharmaceutical companies now that they now say 100% fact, nothing could possibly go wrong with their rushed products that Donald Trump oversaw. It's very stupid. Their narratives have nothing to them but pure, desperate power. That's all they have. The power of having so many of the institutions, the pharmaceutical companies, the big banks, the big food companies, all share the same hymnal, all share the same song, you see? And that's where we have all of this constant attack against any dissent. Every day we see this. We see a constant attack against anybody who is a free thinker. Anybody who says, hey, I'm a scientist, I'm not going to go along with this group thing, that's not how science is done, that person becomes viciously attacked in the public media and completely socially shunned by herd bigots. And that's nowhere. That's not how you do science. That's not how you do culture. But that is how you do power play. That is how you do trying to grab more and more power. That's a great way, because human beings don't like to be ostracized. Human beings don't like to be alone. They don't like to feel isolated. And if you can threaten people with those feelings all the time, if you don't go along with what someone wants, that's a very powerful motivator. It's a very powerful motivator to get people to do what you want, is to make them feel like they're going to be completely isolated and alone. Humans do not like that feeling. Humans want to feel like they're doing what everybody else is doing. We're mimetically wired to want to fit in. And we think that the best way to stand out is to fit in better than the others, everybody else, right? It's kind of a funny paradox, but that's the heart of so much of what motivates human beings is, I will stand out by fitting in better than anybody else. And that exists on left and right and everything. And that's what dominates the atmosphere of the media. And comedian Rob Schneider posted an image of a priest with a face mask and a family with a baby being held up, and the priest is far, far away shooting what appears to be a water gun, I guess, to do a baptism, with the baby held up and the squirt gun shooting water at the baby. And he said, oh my dear Lord, what will history say about us? That's a great thing to ask, what will history say about us? What will history say about such madness in this time. Bloomberg reports world's most vaccinated nation activates curbs as cases rise. So I thought that was supposed to stop cases from rising, but yet a country that's the most vaccinated nation activates curbs and shutdowns as cases rise. Another thing we see, Los Angeles Times says it's the best time ever to sell a used car as long as you don't need to buy one. And of course, that's because of all this artificial money printing out of thin air that's been sent to people as little UBI experiments, which is going into people wanting to buy another car, right? Wanting to buy a used car. And when that happens, you're going to have an inflation in the prices. Other things are going up too, including costs of building a home. Housing going up, car market's going to be overheated. Inflation is a very serious thing that, people who get educated by garbage McWoke government education, they don't know anything about inflation. They don't know anything about any of this stuff. They're just constantly induced into religious catechesis to be a part of a herd, an all-encompassing herd that says money can be printed out of thin air, and if it causes the used car market to artificially inflate in price as people start throwing that newly printed money at things like a second car or whatever, doesn't matter. It has no effect. God is government. Government is God. That's what folks have been taught to believe.